Usually when a new student walks into my studio, I'm not their first guitar teacher. Sometimes I'm their third or fourth teacher that they've tried. And something I notice, the main reason why these students haven't seen much success in learning guitar is that they're spreading their focus on too many things. This video isn't a critique on what some guitar teachers do wrong, but I'll say one thing. Most teachers are very good students themselves, and they take a lot of their natural skills for granted, and they don't realize where the average beginner is coming from. They give their students too much to learn, too many shapes, too many strumming patterns. They focus on what the student is practicing instead of how the student is practicing it. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of awesome teachers out there who get this, but I think that sometimes you do end up with a teacher like that. And my philosophy or my framework for the early stages of learning guitar is all about keeping it simple. Developing your foundation using a small number of chord shapes, just 2 to start with. That way we can focus on strumming, which once again, we keep very simple. We start with the simplest components, but we actually work on putting it all together. So you can play songs from the get-go. And I want you to see the whole picture right away. So that is always the path that I use with my students. And if you're interested, I have put this all into a course. I'll put links down below. We can talk more about that later. But for now, I'd like to share with you my advice on the best way to start learning guitar. I'm going to start with an overview of the whole thing, and then we'll go through an example using a real song so you can see this method in action. Step 1 is to choose a 2-chord song. They're pretty rare. There's not a ton out there, but I have compiled a list of songs that are 2 chords the whole way through so you can learn the entire song and not just the chorus or the verse. I'll put a playlist in the corner and I'll put a link down below for all my recommendations. Also down below, you'll find these instructions in point form, as well as a link to a worksheet that I made on my Patreon page if you would like printable instructions. Anyways, we picked our 2-chord song, we learned the 2 chord shapes from that song, and we practiced the switch just between those 2 chords. With 2 chords, there's only one switch that you need to be able to make for the entire song. And this is where people at first where they get lost. If you're learning a 3-chord song, there's 3 potential switches. A 4-chord song has 6 potential switches. That's way too much multitasking. So we stick with 2 chords, and that leaves us with some processing power for the other things like the rhythm, the counting, Anyways, once we've worked through that switch a few times, we do something that I call the chord switching game, which is a foolproof method for building muscle memory and making the switch automatic. And then we play one section, usually the verse or the chorus, of our simple 2-chord song using downstrokes only. And if you've tried any of my song tutorials, you'll know I do this in each and every lesson for every section of the song by itself because it takes the rhythm out of the equation and it helps you completely train your chord hand to get all the way through each section, and that takes care of it. We set it aside and then we can focus on our rhythm hand. And this part is simpler, but also a little bit more abstract. Sometimes students have a knack for rhythm, sometimes they have 2 left feet. Either way, rhythm is something we can all learn if we realize one thing. Downstrokes and upstrokes are not rhythm. Piano players and vocalists, they don't play downstrokes and upstrokes, but they still have to have rhythm. Rhythm is something inside you. So the first step is to develop your internal rhythm. And I use a variety of methods with my students and in my courses, but usually it's some clapping exercises and learning to say the patterns. Down, 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 up, down, up. That'll work for just about anybody. It's kind of like chanting things at a sports game. Like when people say, ole, 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 or we need a pitcher, not a belly itcher. Those are rhythmic phrases, and we internalize our strumming patterns in that same way, and it makes it so much easier to then just add the downstrokes and upstrokes. So we develop our internal rhythm, and then we start to put it on guitar in the form of downstrokes and upstrokes. We count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The numbers are always downstrokes. The ands are always upstrokes. We constantly move our arm down and up, 1 and 2 and, moving it with the rhythm of the song, and it acts like a built-in metronome. We practice a pattern, we get comfortable with it, just like we did with chord switching, and then it's time to put it together with the shapes. But before we try the whole song, we try our pattern just between our two shapes, back and forth. And then when we're comfortable with that, we can apply it to the whole song because the chords might be in a little bit of a different order, and once we've accomplished all that, we can do one of two things. We can either learn another 2-chord song and repeat that entire process, or we can take your 2-chord wonder and add a third shape. So let's say you learn Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, and that uses the E chord and the A chord. Well, you could add D, and then you'd have E, A, and D, and with those 3 shapes, you could play Three Little Birds by Bob Marley or like a million other songs. So now we're going to take that simple outline and we're going to go through it using a real song. Say we're learning Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, which uses E and A. We figure out the E shape, where to put our fingers, and then we do the same thing for the A shape, and then we figure out the switch between the two. So in this case, I'm starting on my E chord, and I'm going to move these 2 fingers down 1 string set. And that makes our A sus2 shape, which I recommend for very beginners since the switch is just one movement. The whole point is to get used to changing chords. Over time, we can get a bit more complicated, but we want to keep it as simple as possible for now. Once you're comfortable with this method, you can plug in any chord shapes you want. Anyways, we silently go back and forth between E and A, just silent switching, just to get the motions. And when we're ready, we strum them, see how they sound, adjust our thumb, adjust our fingers. And then we can play the chord switching game. And it's really simple. We start off on our first shape, E, and we strum it on beat 1. And then we count 2, 3, 4. And as we count that out, we have all that time to switch. So 1, switch, switch, switch. And then we're on our chord, ready for the next beat 1, and we strum it on beat 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we switch back during beats 2, 3, and 4. So basically, we strum on beat 1, and we have 2, 3, and 4 to switch, and we just do that a few times. 1, switch, 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 back. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And when you're comfortable with that, we move on to round 2 of the chord switching game, where we strum 2 times. 1, 2, switch, switch. 1, 2, switch, back. So now we strum it on beat 1 and 2, and we only have 3 and 4 to switch. More time strumming, less time switching. We do that once again, going 1, 2, 3, switch. 1, 2, 3, switch. So we strum beats 1, 2, and 3, and that only leaves us with beat 4 to make our switch. So we have even less time to make the switch. So this is a really gradual way to get used to switching between any 2 chord shapes. And you want to end up being able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you strum all 4 beats, and you'd have that little tiny bit of time between beat 4 and the next beat 1 to quickly make your switch. So the whole point is to gradually have less time to make the switch. And it's also to take your time doing it. There's no rush. You don't have to rush through the whole thing. You get comfortable at each phase of the chord switching game before you move on. And if you want to practice chords like that, I have a bunch of tutorials that come with my free ebook. It's all free for 17 different common chord switches, from E to A, C to G, and so many more. I'll link a playlist down below so you can do a full run through of the chord switching game with whichever chords you like. Depending on which 2-chord song you pick, they'll be there. Anyways, back to our method. Next, we would play through each section of the song. And I'm just going to do the chorus right now just for demonstration purposes. And that is our chord hand. Now, for strumming, I have a simple pattern for Born in the USA. Just down, 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 up, down, up. And I want to start by saying the pattern. Let's say it together over and over, like a chant. Down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. And now let's move our arm down and up. And I'm going to mute the strings, and I'm just going to do this. And let's keep saying it. Down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. So we move our arm down and up as we say it. And now we're going to try to make this pattern happen. We're going to tell our arm what to do. And you could also think of it this way. We're either playing a downstroke or a down up. Down up is a single entity. On beat 1 and 2, each of those is a down, and beat 3 is a down up, beat 4 is a down up. We count out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we match up the strokes with the counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, rhythm is something that's a little bit different for every person, and I have gone over this from many different angles. I'll link up some tutorials down below so you can get a more in-depth workout on this, but for this lesson's sake, we'll assume that you're comfortable with this pattern. And now we have to try it on E and A, one time on each shape. 3, 4, down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. And at this point, there's a good chance that it doesn't necessarily sound like that right away. As far as picking it or strumming it is concerned, our tone on guitar, using a pick versus using your fingers, there's a whole bunch of things that you do have to take into consideration. And I have a playlist of all the basic stuff that I'll also put down below. There's a lot of little side tracks that we can go down depending on your needs. Every student is different, and I'm going to try to have everything that you need down below. Anyways, we've tried it on our E shape and our A shape, and then we would try it with our song. And for that, I already made a tutorial for Born in the USA, so you can put this entire method to use. There's a link for that down below too, and you can play through every section and learn the entire thing. So that's my method for learning songs on guitar. The whole point is to keep it simple, and once you've built that solid foundation, you'll be able to quickly expand and learn more shapes, more patterns, and ultimately more songs. And if you'd like a guided tour through this entire process, I've developed a complete beginner's course that takes the guesswork out of it. We practice everything together, we learn the songs together, and we go from absolute beginner to confident strummer. There's a link down below if you're interested. Otherwise, have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.